wanna die tonight, Tyler?
Not particularly, no.
That's too bad, because I've got a knife that wants your blood all over.
Hold that thought. I've got to keep going with this review series and talk about the sequel. Because let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my look at the Scream franchise. Today, someone is taking their love of sequels too far in Scream 2. The original Scream was released December 20th, 1996, and many thought it was dead on arrival since they figured no one would see a horror movie at Christmas time. They were dead wrong, as word of mouth on how amazing the film was helped it go on to make $103 million, becoming the highest grossing slasher movie at the time and remaining in theaters for almost 8 months. This surprise, along with the mostly positive critical reception, meant a sequel had to be made. Dimension Films secured Kevin Williamson to write and Wes Craven to direct 2 feature Scream entries after purchasing the original script and positive test screenings. Williamson actually wrote a 5-page treatment for a sequel while writing the original, set during Sidney's college years where a copycat killer would begin their attacks. Returning cast would include Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Jamie Kennedy, and Roger Jackson as the voice of Ghostface. But also Liev Schreiber, who was the blink and you'll miss him Cotton Weary, in a much larger role this time. New additions included the very popular Sarah Michelle Gellar as sorority sister Cece, Jerry O'Connell as Sidney's new boyfriend Derek, Elise Neal as Sid's new friend Hallie, Timothy Oliphant as fellow cinema nerd Mickey, and Laurie Metcalf as nosy reporter Debbie Salt. The production fell victim to one of the earliest instances of script leaks that caused extensive rewrites in order to keep the plot and identity of the killer a mystery. Being released less than a year after the original, would this sequel be able to capture the similar lightning in a bottle with returning cast, writer, and director? Let's take a look. The movie begins outside the theater premiere of Stab, a movie based on the murders in Woodsboro. Phil, played by Omar Epps, is there with his girlfriend Maureen, played by Jada Pinkett. She's not too thrilled, making comments on how the film is just a bunch of dumb white people getting cut up and the African American community is notoriously excluded from the horror genre. Oof, she is not gonna like how this opening scene ends. The theater is handing out Ghostface costumes for the event, which I can only describe as being pandemonium as audience members are yelling and running around the place like maniacs. Stab begins with Casey, except she's getting ready for a shower instead of making popcorn with some extra jump scares thrown in. I've always thought this was funny because it's the exact opposite of what Scream was, a cliche 80s slasher throwback that thinks its audience just wants boobs, blood, and jumps. Phil goes to the bathroom, but overhears someone in the stall next to him. That must be one hell of a sharp knife. The killer returns to Phil's seat next to Maureen, dressed in his clothes. Maureen notices the blood all over his jacket, but is immediately stabbed, the killer taking advantage of the chaotic theater experience by doing it repeatedly, then slipping out undetected. Definitely not as thrilling of an opening as the originals. I know nothing can top that, so I gotta be fair and not judge this one solely on its ability to live up to the one before. Even with the little time spent with them, I like Phil and Maureen since they're both pretty funny and have a believability as a couple. It's fun to see the things said about the movie audience going nuts over watching a girl get killed on screen and how Hollywood sometimes caters to them by dumbing down aspects of the film. But they also try to bring up the fact that African Americans are underappreciated in the horror genre, then they go ahead and kill the two off, adding to that horror cliche that their characters are always the first to die. Not sure if there was a point they were attempting to make, but if there was, I think it was missed entirely. The scene also lacks any sort of build-up, and you're just waiting for the opening kills to transpire. It's fine, but not something to write home about. We jump to Sidney at Windsor College, using the caller ID on a prank phone caller, but hearing about the previous night's murders with her friend Hallie. Over in cinema class, classmates argue whether the movie Stab was directly responsible for the murders and if art can be blamed for others' actions. Randy chimes in, saying as someone who's lived through a similar event, they're living in reality, and art is not being imitated. This deep conversation of life imitating art somehow detours into discussion over sequels and how they're inferior to the original counterparts.
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
Oh, please. By definition alone, they're inferior films.
It's bullshit generalization. Many sequels have surpassed their original.
Oh, yeah?
Name one.
Aliens. Far better than the first.
Yeah, well, there's no accounting for taste.
No, Aliens is a classic, okay? Get away from her, you bitch.
I believe the line is stay away from her, you bitch.
Oh, Randy, you fool. Roll the tape.
Get away from her, you bitch!
I can admit this is a bit of a fun scene with them talking about sequels within a sequel, so the good times are being had, but Mickey's got it, by the way.
I got it, by the way. I got it. The Godfather, Part 2.
Oh, yes, very good, Mickey. You get an A+ in Sequels 102. Sydney borrows Randy to tell him she thinks a new murderer is on the loose, but he thinks it's an isolated incident that doesn't involve them. They're interrupted by Sid's new boyfriend, Derek, much to Randy's dismay. Dewey is spotted limping around campus, looking to make sure Sid is doing okay, while Gail is also in town with her new cameraman, Joel. She gets some overbearing praise from a reporter, Debbie Salt, before bringing out Cotton Weary, the man Sydney accused of killing her mother. Gail wants Sid to partake in an exclusive interview with the two of them.
Oh, Sydney, share with us, please. I'll share with you.
Okay.
Did you get that on film?
Yes, I got that on film.
After that hit, Gail has a heated reunion with Dewey, who's upset with the way she portrayed him in her book about the Woodsboro murders. That night, Sydney and Hallie arrive at a sorority house party being thrown down the street from Omega Beta Zeta, where Cece is stuck inside as a sober sister. She gets a call from the killer that goes as well as you'd expect.
Do you want to die tonight, Cece?
The killer is able to slip into the wide open door while Cece is distracted and jump scare attack her. She's chased upstairs until she has nowhere left to run, getting thrown through glass, stabbed several times, and finally tossed off the balcony. The sorority party clears out when they hear the commotion at Omega Beta Zeta, but when Sydney goes back inside, she decides to answer a ringing phone that could have easily been ignored. Of course, it's the killer looking for her.
Then why don't you show your face, you fucking coward?
My pleasure.
I hope I'm not the only one who thinks hearing that voice not over the phone is absolutely jarring. Sydney is chased around but makes it back outside to Derek, who chooses to go back inside after the killer. When Dewey arrives on the scene, the only thing he finds is Derek, who made it out alive with just a large cut on his arm. Sydney's look says it all as she starts to lose trust in Derek, but Dewey also suspects him, finding it convenient he escaped with just a cut. At the police station, Gail makes an observation about the recent murders. Maureen Evans, Phil Stevens, and Cece Cooper, aka Casey Cooper. They share names with the victims Maureen Prescott, Stephen Orth, and Casey Becker, leading her to believe that they have a copycat on their hands. I'm gonna get this out of the way, this revelation goes absolutely nowhere. They say it's like someone's trying to create a real-life sequel, and it would have been cool if they elaborated with it more, but they don't, and it's never brought up again. So why am I sharing it with you? Because the movie stopped to make a big deal about it, so I am too. Sydney gets security assigned to her, but after she tells Derek she wants to put some distance between them to keep him safe, not thinking he's a suspect at all, he gets a little depressed and decides to prove his love.
I think I love you.
Don't do this.
I think I love you. Isn't that what life is made of? Hey, I think I love you. So what am I so afraid of? I only want to make you happy. And if you say, hey, go away, I will. 'Cause I think I love you.
Dear God, if Ghostface doesn't kill you, the sheer amount of cringe in this scene will. Derek did this to show Sid she can trust him, and caps it off by giving her his fraternity Greek letters, which he swears will protect her. At a cafe, Randy explains the rules of a sequel in a far less entertaining manner to Dewey.
Number 1, the body count is always bigger. Number 2, the death scenes are always much more elaborate. More blood, more gore. Carnage, candy. Number 3, if you want your sequel to become a franchise, never, ever...
How do we find the killer, Randy?
They go over possible suspects as well, including boyfriend Derek, who inexplicably escaped the killer, the potential of a female killer in roommate Hallie, and Mickey, the freaky Tarantino film student.
But if he's a suspect, so am I. So, let's move on.
Well, let's not move on. Maybe you are a suspect.
Well, if I'm a suspect, you're a suspect.
You have a point.
We then get a random scene where Sydney is rehearsing for a play, but almost gets attacked by Ghostface. It could just be a freak out, but Derek's timing is impeccable to the point where Sid suspects him again and says they really need to be distant. Outside, the killer calls Gale's phone, but Randy keeps them on the line while she and Dewey run around campus in an attempt to find them. Randy and the killer actually trash talk each other, Randy unable to believe that they would want to copy that rat-faced mama's boy Billy Loomis.
You wanna be one of the big boys? Huh? Manson? Bundy? OJ? Why did you take it from us?
This is the best yet simultaneously worst part of the movie. There is a decent amount of build up to what is the most shocking moment. To kill off a fan favorite character takes some balls, but we lose someone that would have helped in the long run. In the library, Sidney receives a pre-AOL instant message from the killer, but is then taken by surprise by Cotton, who wants her to join him in a huge Diane Sawyer interview. She refuses as she thinks the book and movie do their story justice enough, but that isn't enough for him.
Everybody thinks I'm some kind of psycho killer, and all I'm asking for is a little fucking Diane Sawyer interview to maybe get my side of the story straight.
For a guy proclaiming how innocent he is, it doesn't go over well with Sid's security, who arrest him only to eventually release him. We start to see Gale showing some actual sympathy for once, feeling remorse over Randy's death. She wants to find the killer, so she and Dewey team up, hoping to find some possible evidence of the killer in her camera footage. While investigating at the auditorium, they also investigate each other until the killer pops up and chases them around until they get separated. While hiding in the sound room, Gale can only watch as the killer stabs Dewey. Wow, did the movie really just kill off another major character? Yeah, we'll see about that. The killer then gets bored and leaves Gale alone. Sidney and Hallie leave campus with their security, while Derek is kidnapped by his fraternity, who give him a hazing for giving away his Greek letters. During the drive, Sidney and crew get a new passenger.
So where are you taking us anyway?
If we tell you, we'll have to kill you. Don't ask, don't tell.
Ghostface takes the wheel and runs down the detective, who never decides to shoot his gun for some reason. Ghostface crashes the car into some construction, knocking him out, but also impaling the detective through the head with a pipe. In the most tense part of the whole movie, Sidney and Hallie have to climb out of the back of the car and crawl over the unconscious Ghostface to escape out the front window. They make it, but Sid has the bright idea to go back to the car to remove the mask of the killer.
He's gone. What?
I'm sorry, but I hate this shot. It's framed so obviously that Ghostface is gonna pop out from behind. And how they were able to get out of the car and sneak around like that undetected, I'll never know. Sidney escapes and goes straight to the campus theater instead of the police station and finds Derek strung up from the fraternity. Ghostface arrives and reveals himself to be...
Surprise, Sidney.
Oh. Alright. Mickey goes on to say that his partner, Derek, left him alone all night. Derek begs Sidney to believe that Mickey is lying and he's not the other killer, but it ends with him getting shot, his dying words telling Sid that he never would have hurt her. Mickey goes on to explain that he wants to get caught because he's going to blame the movies for his actions, an innocent victim affected by cinema that'll lead to a glorious trial where he'll become famous and get top-tier defense. Sidney fights back in awesome fashion until she gets caught again and the surprise partner arrives. Fucking Debbie Salt, the news reporter, is the other killer? Yes, but it turns out she's actually Mrs. Loomis, Billy's mother. She's just out for some good old-fashioned revenge, shooting Mickey, who in turn shoots Gale. Loomis explains her plan to kill Sidney, but pin everything on Mickey. Another chase ensues, involving props from the theater, but Cotton shows up, holding Loomis at gunpoint. She tries to convince him to let her kill Sidney since it'll benefit him.
Bet you that Diane Sawyer interview's looking real good right about now.
Consider it done.
So both the killers are dead, and Gale survived her gunshot. Everything's gonna be just fine.
Just in case.
The next morning, Dewey is wheeled out, having survived his stabs because the knife hit old scar tissue. Gimme a break, he was good as dead. And it all ends with Sidney proclaiming to the press that Cotton is the real hero as she walks away on campus. My overall thoughts on Scream 2. It's a fine, solid follow-up. The pace feels much slower compared to the original, several chunks slightly boring me. I think it runs a little too long at 2 hours, maybe some trimming could have made it flow a little better. It seems like less time is spent on the whodunit aspect and more time is dedicated to fleshing out the characters, most of that dedication going to Sidney, which is not a problem. She gets more development as someone who is trying to move on with her life by going to college to study the performing arts, making new friends, and getting a new boyfriend. Only problem is she can't seem to run from her past, feeling responsible for the horror going on around her, tired of running, and testing her ability to trust others. She grows by the end and stands tall, giving more reason to be considered one of the greatest final girls, also having one of my favorite lines in the series.
Well, you're forgetting one thing about Billy Loomis.
What's that?
I fucking killed him.
Gale also has some substantial development, truly going from the underhanded, bitchy journalist out for the big story to someone who has compassion for the people around her, regretting her past actions. Neve Campbell in Courtney Cox's acting is perhaps the best in this entry. As for the other returning members, Arquette's Dewey is a little more experienced, so he's much less naive and works well as an older brother figure to Sidney. The romantic development he has with Gale feels natural too, carrying over from the original, even though he has some resentment towards her. Kennedy's Randy is fun again, but he's definitely reined in more with not much to do.
Why are you even here, Randy? You'll never be the leading man.
Fuck you!
Bringing back Liev Schreiber as Cotton Weary and giving him a bigger role is one of my favorite developments. He's hungry for fame, wanting to tell his story, while Sidney thinks the less she talks about it, the better. It makes for some good clashing between the two and set up for him being a red herring. You already don't want to like him based on his history, and he doesn't make a compelling case by acting a little psycho-ish in the library, but when he essentially saves the day in the end, you can't help but be happy for him. The rest of the side characters are okay, but nowhere near as lovable or memorable as they were in the original. They hammer it into you that they want you to suspect Derek is a killer, but that's all he's given to work with, having to prove his innocence until he's killed. He's also given the cringiest moment in the franchise when he starts singing in the cafeteria, so that doesn't help him. Hallie is not as supportive a friend as Tatum was, not that she's mean or anything, but I don't sense a tight relationship. And Mickey comes off as a rival to Randy, being the cinephile and all, but nothing comes of it, making his killer reveal to be a shoulder shrug. Which leads me to my disappointment with the ending. Revealing the killers to be Mickey and Mrs. Loomis doesn't have that big of an impact. The Billy and Stu reveal is shocking because it feels like such a betrayal. Sidney's boyfriend and friend were secretly plotting her death. Here it's just like, oh, it's that guy from Randy's film class and the random news reporter is actually Mrs. Loomis. Neat. Mickey's motive makes no sense to me. He wants to kill and be caught so he can blame the movies and get involved in a huge trial where he'll get the support of powerful people who sympathize with his reasoning? I'm sorry, it makes zero sense. At least Mrs. Loomis has the simple motive of revenge, very reminiscent of Mrs. Voorhees' murders. But how does she go completely unnoticed until Sidney's just like, oh, 60 pounds and a ton of work really helped you blend in. I loved how the original addressed and messed around with the conventions of the horror genre, but here that commentary feels like it's missing. They talk about sequels in class, and the rules of sequels are lightly touched upon, Randy noting that the body count is bigger and there's more blood. While that is the case, I miss that creative self-awareness that was prominent throughout the original. There's more focus on mocking the movie within the movie, Stab, with how generic some horror movies can be. The scares feel far less too, the phone calls not being as effectively frightening, despite Roger Jackson still doing a bang-up job as the voice. The most tense scene doesn't even come from a phone call or chase scene, but from the front window car escape with Sidney and Hallie. There are more kills, but they're once again not super over the top, being a lot of stabs and slices, with the exception of the one detective getting his head brutally impaled. So while it tends to drag at times, has less scares, details that go nowhere, and sort of anticlimactic ending reveal, this is a good sequel, as the character development of select characters is done incredibly well. There are a few funny comments on the horror genre and audience, the kills are ramped up and some risks are taken to up the ante. I give Scream 2 3.5 knives out of 5. But let me know your thoughts. Did you prefer this sequel over the original? How do you feel about the killer reveals? And what was your favorite kill? Don't forget to subscribe and follow my Twitter and Instagram. Links to those are in the description. Next week, we have to learn the rules of a trilogy in Scream 3. Until next time, peace.